So I'm going to be carving a green man. We'll start with a plain block of lindenwood and transform it into a mythical spirit of the forest. So here's our little piece of lindenwood that we're going to carve into, and here's our design. There's a fairly high potential for mistakes to happen here, so let's try and avoid them, but we might be fixing a couple of mistakes in this video. So the green man has been around for a really long time. Some say as far back as the Romans, and you see them on churches and stuff in England quite a lot, perhaps in other European countries as well, and they're generally meant to symbolize rebirth or springtime, something like that. I've heard other stories saying they symbolize kind of a protector of the woods as well, but I think that's more in kind of wood spirit territory than it is in green man kind of territory. Maybe you have a different interpretation of the green man. If you do, you should let me know about it in the comments. By the way, YouTube loves it when you watch a video all the way to the end, so if you could do that for me, that would be very cool. Thanks very much. So I always start with the nose when I do a face, because the nose is the bit that generally sticks out the furthest on a face, but we're doing quite a shallow relief here. So we don't want to go too crazy with it, but what I'm going to do is just use a series of gouges, but you could also use a flat chisel for this and just kind of, you know, go around with a flat chisel, but because I have the gouges, I'm going to use the gouges and just make these pretty deep lines, pushing my body weight on it, and then we're going to take away the material from underneath with a chisel like this, a rounded one. Let me just get that focused. There you go. Doesn't have to be this, you could do it with a gouge as well, but I like this one. This is where we could come across our first mistake. I could chip some of the nose off here, and I want this bit to be as high as possible, but since we're doing such a shallow relief, because it's such a thin piece of wood, there's not going to be anything too substantially crazy here with the nose. So now that I've got the approximate depth that I want under the nose there, I'm going to work on the lips, because the lips are really tricky. So, and I think they relate quite a lot to the level of the nose. So I'm going to start just by cutting out the mouth, basically where the opening of the mouth is. So just going to draw that line there, and then I'm going to dive inwards from the top and the bottom. So we're going to dive like down into this valley from the bottom. Bloop. I'm going to dive down into the valley from the top. And already you can kind of see a mouth forming there. Of course, one of the problems is as well, we've got these oak leaves here, but I'm just going to try and ignore them, I think, is the best thing to do while I do this mouth. So we're going to kind of cut around the oak leaves and then try and form the mouth below them. So this is a bit of a special circumstance, but let's see if we can do it. What I'm going to try and do is make it so this top lip kind of goes in that direction. So it's come out from where the mouth is in this direction, and then I want it to kind of point back like that towards the philtrum, which is that kind of bit that goes up into the nose. And then this bottom lip, I kind of just want to bulge around, kind of curve over, and then have a scoop underneath it. So let's get the scoop underneath here first. I'm going to do that with a gouge. This one feels like it needs a little bit of a sharpen, but it's okay for the moment. You don't need a gouge for this. You could just come backwards with another tool if you wanted. You could use one like this to kind of cut underneath, sort of like this, like that. Something like that. Of course, the other thing is that the lip has this central point here, right? So this is the highest part of the lip, and the rest curves backwards. So maybe we should do that next. how, I would say how to do lips, but let's say how I like to do lips. Because let's face it, there's always more than one way to do these things. Right, now we're going to curve the lips down in those directions, like I said I was going to earlier. So we want this to curl down and backwards. Same with this top one, I want it to curl inwards. So we've got the tricky task of kind of trying to keep these oak leaves intact, but also curling the lips backwards. But hopefully you can see that's looking a bit more like lips now. Now with a lot of that cleared up, we can start to work on just the angles of the lips. And by the way, any of you artists, doesn't have to be woodcarvers, any of you artists out there, do you ever like wear gloves when you're doing stuff like this? Because I don't know if you can tell, but it's all been like kind of muddied by the fact that my hand has been rubbing against the graphite, and I'm kind of, you know, making all this kind of greyish blur across the wood. I have seen like really fancy, like really good wood carvers wear like white gloves before. I think a lot of Japanese carvers do it from what I've seen. But does anyone else do it? Let me know, because I'm curious if it's helped you. Right, so we're going to curve this lip up. And basically I want this bit at the bottom to be the bit that sticks out the most, and then it's just going to curve inwards like that. And then with the top lip, what we're going to do, that's not done yet, but with the top lip what we're going to do is we've kind of done our bit that goes down towards the mouth. Now we're going to go up an angle like this, up towards the bottom of the nose. Like that, right? And then we're kind of ready to put our philtrum in place, which is pretty much just a gouge in the center and shoop, like that, up towards the nose, right? There we go, and there's our philtrum, and now we can start shaping the nose a bit more. And I'm going to come around here with the gouge. In fact, we'll just do it right now. Come around here and go up on the inside here, and we'll do that on both sides. And then we'll come kind of over the eyes as well, so sort of a bit like this. I definitely need to sharpen this chisel before I carry on. And we'll make that a bit deeper, but let me sharpen my chisel first, then we'll come back. Right, it's going to come over the top of these eyes. And then we want this kind of part of the nose here to stick out the furthest, right? So I'm going to take down all this stuff from the outside. We're not going to get as much of an effect from this as we would, you know, if we had a lot more wood to work with, but it still will hopefully look interesting. Now I'm using that kind of curved chisel again, because if I use a flat chisel here, I'm probably going to start, it's going to be at such an angle it will start scraping into the wood, right, which I don't want to do. You know, the corner of it will start scraping into the wood, and I don't really want to do that. So let's just keep taking this down, do this kind of thing. Probably dive this top bit back a little bit to give us a bit more of that depth that we really need. Because, you know, if you touch your own nose, that's what it does. Dips, starts sort of going backwards. When it goes, as it goes upwards, it goes backwards, right? After you get past the pointy part. And we're going to use a kind of shallow gouge again to sort of make this central part of the nose stick out a bit more. So we're going to cut the side here. There's lots of ways to do noses. You don't have to do it this way. But I just think this is quite a nice sort of step-by-step way to do it. And take these deeper. Because we haven't got a whole lot of wood to work with here, but we've got enough to make this nose look a bit more convincing, I think. So it's a pretty good start for the nose, which I'm going to leave like that for the moment because I think I'll be able to shape it more once I get these surrounding leaves cut down a bit further. So we're going to move on to the eyes next, which are also kind of tricky, but I don't think they're as bad as the nose. So we're going to start just by going around them and then taking some of the material out. So I don't really have a good gouge for this, so I'm just going to use this this curvy one again. And I'm just going to start by coming under here. And over the top. Try not to slip like that. Whoops. And then doing this. I might have to take this down quite a lot further, but let's just see how we do to start off with. Yeah, I think we're going to have to go down further. You don't have to be this violent with it, but I just know that I've got to go a fair bit of the way down before I start making this eye, so I'm being a little bit rough with it. And I want to curve down this end and this end. I want to make go back a bit further than the rest of it to give us more of an indication of the eyeball in there. Just makes it a bit more, I guess, a bit more convincing, I think, anyway. But once again, it depends on your style. Everyone will do this in a different way, probably. There you go, that looks quite good, I think. Now we just keep shaping this. Until we've got a nice kind of round ball shape. Now to make the eyelid, the bottom eyelid, I'm just going to cut further down under here, like that, and then come down here with this. And this will be quite a fragile part. So I'm going to start with these tiny moustache leaves. And what I'm going to do is just try and find a gouge or something that fits into each of these little curves. So for these little ones, I'm just going to do this. So that's got all of that done, but maybe I'm going to have to come in here with the bendy boy, or like a flat chisel, and just do this kind of thing. Then I'm going to use this curvy one again to take some of the background out. Obviously I'm not going to be able to get right in these little bits in there, but this should at least help me figure out the level that I want this to be at. I'm going to kind of like try and slice up inside like this, so we can get as much of the material out as possible with this chisel. Right, so I've carved around the whole thing now, and now what I want to do is have it so the leaf kind of bends in towards the face a little bit, so it kind of looks like it's going under the nose, you know, kind of like a moustache. So I'm just going to draw the vein back on there, and so what we're going to do is kind of make these scooped out areas like this. I think I'm just going to start by making sure the vein is prominent in the middle. Just going to use this little gouge and come up here to try and make the vein stick out. So luckily I think it looks kind of cool, so we're going to keep going. There we go, I think that looks pretty cool. I found that rather than sweeping down here with the gouge and making this vein first, I'm just going to scoop these and make the vein as I go. Because I didn't really need to do that on the second moustache leaf. I found that I didn't really need to do it that way. This way is just as good. So we'll start once again by kind of trying to fade the leaf in towards the face. And now we can do our little scoops. So let's start here. So I've just been carving the little kind of grooves in this leaf. But I did mess up a little bit. You might be able to spot it if you're eagle-eyed. You can see that I went up a bit too far and cut that lip there. So I'm just going to go over what I would do to fix it. It basically involves carving it further down because, you know, you could glue the piece back in, but that piece is long gone, and I don't know, gluing a piece back in is normally my last resort because it never really quite looks that good. So let's just try and fix this by carving it down a little bit more. Not really doing anything crazy here. I mean, luckily I kind of left these lips a little bit oversized. Not because I was anticipating this, but just because I guess because I hadn't carved the leaves back at that point earlier. So I just sort of left them a bit bigger than they had to be without realizing it. It is quite a deep thing that's gone down pretty far. It's still visible, still there, so we basically had to carve it all the way down. So what I'll do is I'll mimic what we've done there on the other side. Now I'll kind of stand back and look at it, and it looks fine. But what we're going to do is just smooth it all back in together. Try and take this kind of ridge off here that we've created. There we go. See, and this is why the start is so important, because where this sort of nose and that is sort of determines where the rest of the leaves are, honestly. If you want to get this similar look to the leaves kind of slowly sloping out. If the nose is really deep, then obviously they're going to slope in quite a lot. If the nose is not so deep, then they're not going to slope in at all. Or barely going to slope in, so a lot of the features influence the other features, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. There you go, that looks pretty cool. And there's this little gap in here. I did draw another like oak leaf here when I did the sketch, but I really didn't like how it looked, so I thought, okay, this is just going to be a kind of empty space. It's going to be just lower than these other two leaves, and hopefully that'll be okay. There you go, and that looks pretty cool. Very nice to touch as well. There we go, I think that looks pretty cool. Just cleaned it out a little bit. Let the area highlight the leaves. And that's pretty good. Obviously there's a bit more stuff to do around there, but I'm happy with that. You obviously need a pretty sharp gouge for this, because you're doing a lot of cross grain work. I always have a strop near me, but sometimes I do just like hone it a little bit on like a 3000 grit wet stone, ceramic stone I've got, but you know, any kind of stone you've got probably pretty good. Now you may have heard me ramble before about how I like to do eyes, and one thing I really like to do is to raise the pupil. Most people have told me that that's not the way it should be done, but who gives a crap, right? So I think it looks better this way. Personally, I prefer the look of a raised pupil, so that is what I do. So because the pupil is so small, I've got this tiny little gouge, and instead of going straight down with the edge, probably better to highlight it this way. Instead of going like straight down like this, I'm going to angle it a little bit like that, so that the cut goes further up that way, and that tends to help so that when I make the circle around the pupil, that the top doesn't just pop off. That can sometimes happen. When it does, I just carve lower. But in order to try and avoid that, I'm going to try and do it the way I just mentioned. So pushing up at an angle a little bit and then doing that around every side. Concentrating on trying to make a circle with the gouge, which can be a little bit tricky, but you can get it done if you concentrate. So I'm going to take this shallow gouge and just do tiny little cuts around there to start off with, just to try and get that material out of there and see if we can do it without snapping the top off. Alright, now let's try and come in there again. There you go, kind of just like putting the chisel at the back and bending it down. There might be a better way to do this, but it's the way that I've got in my brain at the moment, so that's the way I'm going to do it. When we've got that all sorted, what I like to do is take a chisel, hang on, let me just clear this bit off here. Take a flat chisel and curve this over a little bit. Because once again, I like how this looks. You know how I always say at the end of these that, oh, I'm gonna tidy this carving up before I put the oil on it or whatever? Well, if you're wondering what that looks like, it looks like this. Now it's time to get the toothbrush and whoa, and brush it all the way. Try to get all those little flaky bits off. I'm going to finish it with some boiled linseed oil. I really like this design, and I'm glad I carved the oak leaves in the way that I did, because I think it adds quite a lot to it. But let me know what you think, and also thanks a lot for watching, and maybe I'll catch you again next time.